Hey guys, James from TechLens here, and today I want to talk to you about the Node 202 and thermal optimization using the Arctic Accelero Xtreme 3 cooler. That's a mouthful. Let's get into it. This is a popular setup for small form factor enthusiasts, as it provides the biggest surface area for cooling your GPU, while also allowing you to mount 120mm case fans in place of the fans included with the Arctic Accelero cooler. Enthusiasts have loved this for overclocking headroom and noise optimization. When I built this, I saw on Reddit that the best configuration was to pull air away from the GPU and exhaust it out of the case, as the CPU cooler will serve as an intake. That's how I set up my configuration, and I've been happy with the thermals and noise level ever since, but I've never actually tested it myself, so I want to do that today. There are two configurations that I want to test: how I currently have it set up, fans pulling air away from the GPU with no dust filter, as this is exhausting air out of the case, and fans pushing air onto the GPU with a dust filter, as this is set up as an intake and a dust filter is more important for an intake setup. I did a poll on Instagram asking the TechLens community, get in the group, link in the description, which configuration would be better for cooling, push or pull. 46% said push and 54% said pull, so it looks like the community is pretty torn on this too. So what we'll be testing today is CPU temperature, GPU temperature, and GPU core clock, as GPU core clock is partially linked to GPU temperature, and this will allow us to determine which configuration is better in terms of cooling. We will have the GPU fans set to 75%, which is just over 900 RPM for these Noctua fans. The room temperature is a constant 19 degrees C, and we'll be running the GPU stock. We'll be using Unigine Heaven Benchmark, running it for 30 minutes, and polling the data for the subsequent 10 minutes of the run. This is to ensure we collect data after we have thermally saturated the heatsinks. The system itself is an Intel 9600K with a Scythe Big Shuriken 2 Revision B with an EVGA GTX 1060 Superclock GPU, but that actually doesn't matter too much, as we only care which airflow configuration is better optimized, and this will mean the same thing regardless of the hardware. So if you have a stronger or weaker system, the exact numbers will be different, but the conclusion of which configuration is better will still apply. One thing that is very important if you want to build a similar setup yourself is to make sure that you get a GPU where the mounting for the Accelero 3 cooler is in line with the notch on the PCI connector. Otherwise the Accelero may be too far back to fit into the Node 202, which I've seen a couple cases online. So let's get into test number one. As you can see with the GPU fans set up as pull and exhaust, the CPU temperature averaged out at 52 degrees C, and the GPU temperature averaged 72 degrees C, while the GPU core clock stabilized at 1962 MHz and didn't budge. So let's open up the Node 202 and flip these fans around. What you want to do is unscrew the 4 corner screws holding the side panel in place. Flip it over and lift the side panel off to reveal the internals. Unscrew the graphics card by the case's PCI frame, which I've already done, and unplug both the power to the GPU and the fan cable so we can remove it. Now we get a good look at the GPU with the Arctic Accelero Xtreme 3 cooler and how we have adapted the GPU fan connector to a standard 4-pin PWM fan, link in the description below. Next, you want to flip it over to unclip the other side panel, starting with the back portion and moving down the side and then over to the other side. The reason we do it this way is so that we can hook the panel over the USB ports and the auxiliary ports to avoid any damage to them while removing it. Now we can go ahead and remove the 8 screws holding the fans in. Side note, I don't have a dust filter on the case for the PSU as it's set up as an exhaust, but I would recommend having the filter on if yours is an intake. We're going to put the computer to one side for a second and repair my GPU dust filter, which seems to be peeling away from itself. Let me know in the comments if your dust filters are doing the same. For this, we're going to grab some epoxy. This Gorilla Glue stuff is nice and convenient with a double barrel tube. Pop it onto something you don't care about and mix the two solutions well. Start by dabbing the epoxy onto where the dust cover is peeling away. Don't put so much on that will spill over the edge when you stick it back together. You really don't need that much. Then, just press and slide. And the same for the other side. Perfect. Now we can set the dust filter to one side as the epoxy cures and finish flipping the fans over. Cut any cable ties holding the fans or cables to the case. I find it easiest to manage cables together, and I'll rotate the fans so that the cables terminate as close to one another as possible. Next up, flip it over and screw the fans back in. Do a quick check that the dust filter is stuck properly and no epoxy has leaked out. Perfect. Now it's time for reassembly. Route the cables roughly where they need to be. Pop the GPU back in. Then reconnect the power for the GPU and the fan cable. Be sure to strap the cables down so that they don't move. It's going to be really annoying going back and doing this if they wiggle over and interfere with the fan blades. If you need to hook under a tight space, just pre-bend the cable tie so that it slides through easier. Remember, fan holes are a great option to mount cable ties to. Now it's time to put the side panels back on. Start with the front, over the USB and auxiliary ports to make sure we don't damage them. Then snap the rest of the clips in place. Pop the other panel back on and check to see there's no gaps. If there are, the panel is probably resting on a cable, so go back into the case and check the four corners. Screw in the four corners and secure it in place. Job done. Time for testing round 2. So in our push and intake configuration, the CPU temperature averaged out at 56 degrees C and the GPU temperature averaged out at 67 degrees C, while the GPU core clock stabilised at the same speed of 1962 MHz. Between the push with the dust filter and the pull without the dust filter configuration, we actually saw an interesting result. Yes, in our testing, the push configuration provided a 5-degree drop in temperature for the GPU, just over a 7% decrease, but an increase in the CPU temperature by 4 degrees, which is also just over 7%. So what does this mean? Which one is actually better, and which one should you go for? Well, my suggestion would be to record your own temperature. Use Unigine Valley or Heaven or Superposition, use Cinebench R20 or R15 for the CPU, and figure out, is your CPU getting too warm? Then you might want to configure it as a pull. If your GPU is getting too warm, then you might want to configure it as a push. But ultimately, the configuration is up to you. Now you just know which is better for which reason. So give me a big thumbs up if you enjoyed the video, and a thumbs down if you didn't. Consider subscribing if you want to see some more cool content. Maybe we'll do some more stuff with the Arctic Accelero Xtreme 3 cooler. Stupid name. Anyway, yeah, thumbs up, thumbs down, subscribe, notifications, bell icon, social media, description, website, latest.